Yeah, so we've got to finally talk about Candace Owens. This is not a conversation that I have been wanting to have. In fact, to some degree, this has been a conversation that I have been terrified to start. In fact, you can ask my mom, who sometimes, occasionally, is on my show. I'm going to be seeing her over the holidays. You can ask her how much I was not wanting to get into this conversation. She happened to watch the multi-part series that Candace did on Brigitte Macron, Becoming Brigitte. She happened to watch that every episode with me because I had no idea when I started that series what I thought about all of this, and I was very open toward and interested in the idea that Mrs. Macron might actually be a man. I was not opposed to this idea. So I said to my mom, I said, "Hey, watch this with me. It sounds like it's going to be interesting." And of course, Candace was promising major revelations and also all of this evidence that she was going to provide. I'm finally going to tell you who. This is what she was promoting. I'm finally going to tell you who Brigitte Macron really is. And we've got this 5-part series, and I'm going to be sitting down with this serious journalist, Xavier Poussard. Finally, he's going to be talking about all of the research that he's done to validate this conclusion. So I was like, great, great. So I sit down and watch it with my mom day after day as each episode came out. And both of us came to the same conclusion. And by the way, let me say rather independently, because my mom frequently disagrees with me on all kinds of things. And in fact, I told her when we started the Candace series, I said, I want you to really pay attention to this and think about this because you may end up feeling differently than I do. And I want to get your perspective. So we both watched it. And it was obvious to both of us that it was a smoke and mirrors show. That, first of all, there was absolutely no evidence offered by Candace Owens to validate her claims about the Macrons. The idea basically being, by the way, that Emmanuel Macron was a kind of a Manchurian candidate who was groomed by all of these shadowy, evil, Illuminati type world powers. Illuminati is my term, but basically this is the gist of it. Secret world powers to then be married to a man masquerading as a woman. And there's also some allegations of familial incest in there, and basically a secret ring of pedophiles running France and all of that. So basically, you can take as someone said on Twitter earlier today, you can basically take all of the elements of some crazy spy novel and throw them in there, and that explains these kinds of delusions. And of course, we also have the female assassin that has now, according to Candace, entered into the mix. I was a big fan of La Femme Nikita back in the day. I have to say, when I was a teenage girl, she exemplified to me. I'm talking about that old USA show. Peter Wilson, she exemplified to me the kind of girl power that I thought was really cool at that point. But anyway, all of this stuff thrown in, this Frankenstein's monster of all kinds of different conspiracy theories and delusions. And that is where we're at. But yes, I watched the whole series, Becoming Brigitte, with my mom, and it was very obvious that it was a smoke and mirror show, that there was no actual evidence provided. Also, this is one of the things also that in the Macron lawsuit is detailed so well. Candace jumping around from point to point and never tying up threads, huge gaping holes in her theories that never get explained. They're just kind of shrugged off, and then it's on to the next thing. It's a real sort of sleight of hand routine that works really well on even the smartest of people. And I want to say, by the way, at the outset here, that I know extremely smart people, podcasters, non-podcasters, friends of mine. I know extremely smart people and generally very reasonable, rational people, some of them even more reasonable and rational generally than myself, who believe Candace and don't see the issues, I guess, that I see. And I am in no position at all to talk down to anyone who buys Candace's theories. I'm in no position to talk down to anyone, and everyone truly is entitled to their opinions. But I can say that from my perspective, as someone who I think it's just almost obvious to me that these are fantasies, and I don't know if they're intentional fantasies or unconscious fantasies that Candace is having. In other words, I don't know if she intentionally knows that she's scamming, or if she truly just has no BS filter and has gone kind of nuts in this direction, or something in between. But I am really amazed and, to a degree, yes, disheartened by the fact that a number of intelligent, reasonable people I know don't see a problem here, a giant problem here, and don't see huge red flags and huge warning signs, and also seem to think that it somehow makes sense that you would have all of these different people at all these different levels, not only of government, but of U.S. society, involved in a conspiracy to take down a podcaster who wasn't even that influential. I'm talking about Charlie Kirk, but I guess you could say it about Candace Owens too, or who thinks that the leader of France has the kind of power to order the execution of an individual based on a personal whim. Like, I know that there's a lot of rotten stuff in history, and I know there's a lot of rotten stuff in our government and other governments, but no, I just don't think it is reasonable to have this worldview that sees things being at this degree of conspiratorial, this kind of sinister conspiratorial level. And when we talk about theories about Charlie Kirk, and at various times, Candace has insinuated or said outright that it basically would have involved the federal government, the FBI, perhaps even Trump, Kash Patel, also the Utah police, also these pastors, and also college kids that were present, and the university itself. And all of these people would have to have a perfectly sealed shut operation for no leaks to be coming out, no one to have second thoughts or to blab something to someone, no cracks in any of this. Meanwhile, Candace is taking complete coincidences, yes, coincidences, and she's tying them together in a sleight of hand for her audience and presenting it in such a professionalized way that people are not seeing the coincidences here. They're saying, oh my God, that's weird. Well, that tells you something. Well, no, actually, a lot of the times there's just weird shit that happens or stuff that doesn't go according to our expectations, but it doesn't mean that it's always a conspiracy. And when you study history, one of the things I find is that so often truth can be stranger than fiction, or truth can be stranger than our expectations. And there are times when there are just crazy coincidences. But a lot of people don't see this, and they don't see, going back to Becoming Brigitte, let's talk again about that documentary, pseudo-documentary that Candace did, that I watched all of it, even took notes. I feel like a fucking idiot, by the way. Candace Owens, shame on you that you got me to take notes on that ridiculous batch of BS. If I'm mad at anyone, I'm mad at myself that I even entertained all that. People don't see that she's not giving her audience most of the time the context that they need to properly understand what she is putting in front of them. And I know that I have used this example again and again and again, but I'm going to use it again just because it is a perfect encapsulation of a wider phenomenon that I'm trying to explain to you related to Candace Owens, which is when she went all down this rabbit hole in that Brigitte series and talked about how apparently Emmanuel Macron had stated that the French writer André Gide was his favorite writer, or a particular text was his favorite text written by this guy. And in fact, he even had something in his office, some kind of a tribute to, or a quote, I believe it was, from Gide, something to that effect in his office. You can see it like in the background. And Candace then, what she took from that, her rock solid interpretation of that, presented to the audience, was that if you look into the biography of André Gide, what you'll find is that, yes, he was a pederast. He preferred teenage boys, and he at times used the services of teenage male prostitutes. I would say willing prostitutes, but also no, I'm not saying it's right. But Candace then makes the point for her audience, as seemingly as is like just the most natural assumption possible, that, well, look, if this is Emmanuel Macron's favorite author, then therefore Emmanuel Macron must be a pervert. Because why would your favorite author be a pervert if you yourself weren't a pervert? It just makes perfect sense. Okay, guys? Yeah. Except Candace, that writer also happens to be a Nobel Prize winning writer. He won a Nobel Prize for literature. And he also happens to be considered one of the greatest authors, one of the greatest writers, and one of the greatest modern philosophers in European history. So much so that when I was getting my degree, my PhD in English, I happened to come across some of his writings and even, in fact, used to teach a little bit of André Gide's writing in the college classes that I used to teach. Oh my God, I must be part of some horrific cabal, right? So, yes, of course, it would make sense that if this guy, André Gide, this writer, this classical writer, is like basically one of the biggest literary superstars in the history of France, it would make sense then that, yes, maybe the president of France might think that's his favorite writer. There's another explanation besides, oh, the president of France must be some kind of pervert. But she doesn't provide that for her audience. There's rarely any kind of Occam's razor with Candace Owens and her analysis where things just are as they are, or they are for a normal, uninteresting, non-conspiratorial reason. And the fact that I have seen so many instances, that's not the only one. I didn't just cherry pick that. There's others. The fact that I have seen so many instances of Candace Owens taking a roundabout way to explain something, getting into conspiratorial analysis where it is not necessary or even logical, and then also withholding valuable context from her audience that would explain it, and engaging in seemingly deliberate distortions, then I lose complete faith in her and in any conspiracies that she proceeds with. And I thought that it should have been a giant wake up call to everyone, especially to people who so far have not been doubting her. I think it should have been a giant wake up call to people when she posted on Twitter several days ago that she had just found out that the French military trained with the American military, I believe it was in California, around the time of Charlie Kirk's assassination. And then she proceeds to say flat out that the French military was definitely involved in Charlie Kirk's murder. That these same people who were training in California, that some of them were definitely involved, or people like them were definitely involved in Charlie Kirk's murder. Of course, once again, giving no evidence of anything. Now, here's just another glaring example for you. I want you to listen here. It is, I have a significant other who was in the Army for many years, made it up to the rank of captain. Oh my God, maybe he's part of the cabal too. He's part of the conspiracy. He got me into this conspiracy, and now I'm just working for the Zionists and Emmanuel Macron. Anyway, my significant other, Army veteran, 2 tours, by the way, in Iraq, which is more than you, Candace Owens, will ever do for this country. But anyway, Army veteran. I tell him about this latest shit with Candace, and he starts laughing, and he says, "We always train with people from other nations. It's part of like having, like allies and collaboration." And I know he's right, because when he was in the Army, I remember meeting guys socially through him, meeting guys from Jordan, I believe, Yemen, I believe, Australia, I believe, Great Britain, I believe, maybe even France. France! All right. Yeah. So I wanted to get an expert in here to confirm again what I was saying, that it is completely normal for American military to train with military from other nations. Do you know everything that's going on with Candace, what she's claiming?
Just a little bit. The France wanting to kill her. I mean,
yeah, that's close enough. So she's saying that she found out that a unit of the French military was training with American military in California when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and that therefore that indicates that members of the French military were involved in killing Charlie Kirk. So I want to ask you, is this some weird, rare thing that happens where our military trains with guys from other countries?
Well, her thinking that is an indication that maybe she doesn't, maybe she's a little too addicted to conspiracy theories. But yeah, they train with them all the time. I think when you mentioned this earlier to me today, and there was some Gulf War, 1991 Iraq War thing on TV earlier, that I mentioned that, for example, the French were our western flank in the big left hook in that invasion. Just to illustrate, yeah, we work with all kinds of military. They train all the time. I'm not like an expert on what France is doing or what some detachment of the French military is doing in California, but it didn't surprise me. My last, at Fort Benning, where I trained, there's all kinds of international training going on. It's mostly students, um, not necessarily big units, but over in El Paso, where I was stationed again, it's a lot of Germans stationed there. We train up a lot of their missile defense stuff. There's training all the time, and we train over in other countries all the time as well. Um, so yeah, there's a ton of it. It's probably always going on at various times. Um, you could elaborate, but no, it doesn't indicate. You'd have to have some. I don't even know why I'm responding to it, honestly. I mean, it's just a retarded take on it. It's not a very informed take. So yeah.
All right, last question. Are you an Israeli plant who has been planted in my life to try to sway my coverage of Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens?
I wish. That sounds pretty fun.
She had Candace Owens. She has either she's just complete out consciously scamming, and she knows it's a bunch of shit and she doesn't care, or she has she's drunk her own Kool-Aid and she's in this delusional world, some kind of like twisted modern Joe McCarthy. I don't know, or something in between. But she has no BS detector. And I don't know if she's actually talking to someone. She claims that someone high up in the French intelligence service or with connections to French intelligence has now told her that all this information that she's spreading about she was the target of an assassination. It was a female assassination. She was a target of an assassination plan, and it was a female assassin. It was an Israeli and cooperating with France and whatever. I don't know who she's talking to or if she's even speaking to someone, because at this point she is engaged in so many obvious lies and distortions that I feel like she is capable of just flat out lying. But it's also entirely possible that she is speaking with someone who has totally scammed her. I mean, hell, the French government itself, if they wanted to throw Candace for a loop, then they would feed her a bunch of weird, crappy, untrue, conspiratorial stuff to properly discredit her as she deserves. But I don't know who she's speaking to. I think it's just someone who's fooled her. But whatever the case, she's still provided no evidence of anything, and she is making outlandish claims and assertions, and she's not providing any context. And this has gotten dangerous because there are real people's lives that are being harmed by this. I know that there are hardly any of you out there with any sympathy for the Macrons, because you say, oh, they started a relationship when he was 15 and she was his teacher, and that's just disgusting, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want to even get into talking about that. I would agree that it was not a good way to start anything, and not something I would promote. But they have been together seemingly in a successful relationship and a supportive relationship for many, many, many years, that their families also support, and that the French public, at least prior to Candace Owens and stirring up all these crazy outlandish theories, the French public seem to by and large support. And so I don't see what good it is doing to make up horrible, hideous lives that turn this elderly woman who seemed to have a lot of dignity and a lot of style into some kind of a traveling freak show. And one of the things that's pointed out in the lawsuit by the Macrons is the significant emotional damage it has done to them, knowing that everywhere they go, everyone they meet, that there are a significant number of people in the audience who believe this crap, or who suspect it could be true, or who are thinking about it. Imagine what that must do to someone. Seriously, it could completely destroy an otherwise happy or healthy relationship. It really could. And I know that people are very upset about the way that it started, but you also have to realize that cultures are different, particularly in certain periods of time. 15 was the age of consent in France. Is it still? Or did France not even have an age of consent? But generally in Europe in general, 15 is a standard age of consent. And people will say, well, Emmanuel Macron, he was just a child, he was just a child, he was just a child. Well, it could be that this child was, in this one instance, actually more mature for his age than the average 15-year-old. Do you want to know how I know this guy was probably more mature than his age for the average 15-year-old? It's because one day he became the president of fucking France. It takes a lot of maturity. It takes a lot of intelligence to climb your way to that position and to maintain it with a degree of dignity. If you don't like his policies or whatever, or you think he's a joke, fine. I probably do too. But I'm telling you that this was not your average 15-year-old because he grew up to be the president of France. And he's been with his lady for decades, and everyone seems to be okay with it, except Candace Owens and Xavier Broussard. And by the way, let me say something about Xavier Broussard, because I'm tired of people acting like this is some really esteemed, credible journalist, because that's the way Candace Owens has packaged him and presented him. And so, of course, that's the way that it seems. But he is a fringe journalist in France. He's not a mainstream, by any stretch of the imagination, journalist. He doesn't have the credibility of even a Joe Rogan. This is someone who, please don't forget, launched his investigation of the Macrons with the help of a self-proclaimed psychic. In fact, one of the women who was sued in France over elements of this is a psychic. And she was sued because a lot of this stuff stemmed from a YouTube video that she did with another lady, partly based on her own psychic impressions. I'm telling you, y'all, this is just a joke. We're talking about psychics here. I'm telling you, that's where some of this shit started. And self-interested fringe pseudo-journalist. And then it got picked up by Candace Owens because she is into titillating conspiracy theories, and she got a hell of a lot of traction from it. She got me taking fucking notes on her series. And meanwhile, it's all just nothing. It's all just nothing. Meanwhile, Candace Owens, if I were her, I don't know if I would want to be making up fictions or spreading rumors about other people's sex lives behind closed doors or other people's romantic lives, because your husband's got some shit in his closet, does he not, in terms of allegations? How many people know? I posted about this today on Twitter. I have known about this, the husband thing, for months and months and months. There are rumors, all kinds of credible people I know. There have been rumors forever about the fact that her husband is either gay or bi. And I know they have kids. I'm not denying sex has occurred. And I don't, and that's stuff that I would never repeat, except that I do feel like there's a kind of a lesson here in this, in that Candace is spewing all this stuff all over the place. And I just wonder if her own life would bear up under this kind of not only reflection but distortion, this kind of attention and distortion. Former Breitbart editor Raheem Kassam, prominent conservative, used to co-host a show with Steve Bannon. I don't know if he still does. Breitbart editor, big name, used to work with Turning Point, big name conservative in Great Britain, came out publicly years ago and accused Candace Owens' husband, George Farmer, of sexual assault. Those are his words, sexual assault, and of being gay in his words. I've heard all of these rumors all over the place for years from all kinds of people who don't want to go on record, and nor should they. I don't care. I don't give a shit. And before they got married, but Candace and her husband are on record as saying this. He proposed 17 days after they met. They never had one romantic moment or romantic conversation or anything like that. Didn't even have a date. Mostly just talked online, which is fine. People do that. And then he proposed 17 days later. And he said he was just drawn to her power or whatever. Well, maybe so. But can you imagine if the shoe were on the other foot and Candace Owens was analyzing her own marriage? Wouldn't she say that there was some weird stuff? This isn't normal, guys. Guys, this is not normal. Guys, this is not normal. As Christ said in the New Testament, in the Gospels, you better worry about the board in your own eye before you start making up stories about the speck in someone else's eye, to paraphrase. I know what a big Christian Candace Owens is. She's got that crucifix in the background, and she posts pictures of herself with priests a lot. But, if you look at Candace Owens' background, and by the way, I take no pleasure in this and have gone a long time without ever talking about it, despite being very concerned about what Candace Owens has been doing. Because just like anyone else, I wouldn't want someone talking about the most embarrassing moments in my history or whatever. But I want to remind people that Candace Owens began, 10 years ago, maybe a little more, as a far left progressive blogger, commentator, what have you. And I don't want to get into it more. She has some unsavory things in her past in terms of private, personal legal disputes and stuff she's been in or whatever. I don't know, maybe justified. But she started out as a as a leftist progressive commentator, trying to be a commentator. And then what happened was she decided that she was going to start basically a doxing site. It was going to be called Social Autopsy. You can look all this up. Social Autopsy. And it was a way basically to dox. It was a site that would dox, provide the identity, name, address, location, or whatever of people who supposedly were engaging in online harassment. In other words, if someone is attacking you, you feel like being mean to you on Twitter, then this site is going to help you find out who exactly that is, and then you can know what their address is and all that, whatever. Well, Candace Owens ended up getting called out for this, obviously. And so it happened to be apparently the case that there were some right-wing accounts that actually agreed with her in some kind of maybe free speech way or something. I don't know. And then Candace had what she herself has described as an overnight conversion to the right-wing perspective. She says that it was overnight. She just saw the light overnight and realized the right was right and the left was wrong. And then she started putting out videos as Red Pilled Black. That was the title of the videos, Red Pilled Black. And this is actually how I first started to learn about Candace, because I used to watch her videos in the old days. In the old days, Candace was doing what I'm doing in terms of basically doing videos from her bedroom, right? And she went by Red Pilled Black, and she would dress, very casually and stuff, more casually than I'm looking right now. And she would just go on these Candace rants, and they were less polished in those days. They were more you know what I'm saying? And she would just go on these Candace rants, right-wing rants. And a number of them were very interesting, and some of them I found really compelling at the time, whatever. Obviously, I can't deny she's smart. I can't deny that she's got a great raw engine there, right? And that's part of why she's so good at fooling people, because people think, well, she can't be that smart. She can't be that polished. She can't come off as professionally as she does, but also be that wrong or that crazy or that scheming. And the fact is, sometimes, occasionally, yes, it can be that way. And then that's how she got involved with Turning Point, because if you'll remember at that point, this was when, talking 10 years ago around then, this was when there were very, very few publicly right-wing Black voices out there. So Turning Point picked her up, and then she met Charlie Kirk, and she started working with them for a while and became friends with Kanye West and all of that. Then she went to work for the Daily Wire, and then the Daily Wire got sick of all of her anti-Israel stuff and the conspiracy theories. Now, how much of that was justified, how much of it wasn't, I don't know. Despite what people think, I'm not a Zionist. I don't know what the hell I think about what's going on in that part of the world, and I don't cover it on my channel generally. But maybe to a degree, she got fired from the Daily Wire because of the anti-Israeli sentiment, and maybe to a degree it was because they saw, maybe even behind the scenes, that she was about to go deep into conspiracy cuckoo land, as she has done. So it turns out in hindsight that the Daily Wire, it seems, made the right call in getting rid of her. And then that's how she's ended up here. And she started her show. So it's been a checkered history. Not saying there's anything wrong with it per se, but I think that people look at her and they see someone who is so attractive, so polished, so well put together, so articulate, so calm, confident sounding, all of this, and so obviously intelligent in a raw intelligence kind of way. And they think she couldn't be like this if she were deep into conspiracy cuckoo la la land. And I just have to say that yes, she could, and I believe she is. And a lot of people aren't going to like me saying that, but I just, it's it more than anything else, it is just a matter of conscience with me, really, because I just feel like we're at this point now where at least some eyes are opening to how bizarre this is. I feel like Candace has finally jumped the shark. She has finally gone too far, and some people now, their minds are open. They've cracked open at least a window, and some people are paying attention too, who've just been shrugging this off as not important, or oh yeah, it's crazy Candace again or whatever. And they're like, no, this is actually like weird and serious, and it's problematic that this has become such a powerful narrative in our society, and it's taking up so much space. And so I feel like now is the time for people like me who have been paying attention, who have felt like something has been wrong for a while, to go ahead and step up and say what we think here. So I hope you'll get this, receive it as it's intended, and I am going to have more content coming out along these lines coming up in the next several days. So thank you so much, everyone who has followed me and supported me. My links are below. Holiday tips always appreciated. My PayPal, and yeah, more to come.